Tanner Pearson signs with the Canucks for 3 years, a $3.25 million cap hit per year. He's 28 now and will be 29 in August. I'm a huge fan of what Pearson does on the ice, but this contract feels wrong on many levels. Let's break it down. Pearson's been having a down year statistically, though the Canucks have mostly played terrible. Their production has been all over the place. JT Miller and Hughes have been picking up piles of points, while a large percentage of the time those two players have looked pretty awful. Pearson, on the other hand, like Bo Horvat, is playing a pretty good game with and without the puck against the toughest competition, but just not getting the points. The majority of the time, I think Pearson is actually one of the best Canucks on the ice in terms of what he does with and around the puck, although that comes with the caveat of his skill level putting him on the second line at best, and more likely a strong third liner. I'm not in the dressing room, of course, but I appreciate his visible leadership on the ice. The Canucks have had some terrible stretches, and he almost always seems like a positive-looking influence on the ice, playing hard at both ends, not afraid to stand up for his team. As much as we can criticize management's signings, the trade for Pearson was an absolute steal. Somehow convincing Pittsburgh to take good Branson and his $4 million for Pearson in a total fleecing. So let's get to the many reasons why the signing feels off. The Canucks aren't competitive right now. Benning has said he expects them to be competitive in 2 years. So a 29-year-old most likely on the decline with an expiring deal in your competitive window doesn't really make any sense. It would make a lot more sense to get a pick or a prospect now that can help you in that window or be used in the upcoming Seattle Kraken expansion draft. But he was signed, and signed early. COVID has caused a flat cap, and money-conscious teams, we saw Hoffman forced to take a PTO just to get back into the league, we see that these money-conscious teams are going to be squeezing out players, and Tanner Pearson seems like he would be a perfect candidate to get squeezed out once the big money players are gone and the $1 million players are all snatched up to fill those holes. Guys that make around $3-4 million in this middle, they are always risky. They can be some of the worst contracts. The Canucks have several of them. And I really think he would have been looking at a huge pay cut. Pearson left to wait. If the Canucks didn't sign him now, probably would have end up drastically reducing what he was asking for. Maybe signing a 1-year show me contract somewhere else, or not even a show me, just like a 1 year, give me some money now while we sort out the pandemic, or more likely a modest $2 million-ish over 2 or 3 years. Signing Pearson now, while he's injured, after publicly stating you were hoping to sign him, killed all of the Canucks' leverage. It's just plain terrible bargaining. Yet another example of buying extremely high. Like I've said many times before, I'm going to stop blaming Benning and describe the moves done by the Canucks management rather than Benning. Because it certainly feels like Aquilini has his fingerprints all over the place on a lot of these deals. The Canucks extended their goalie of the present and future, Thatcher Demko, at $5 million a year for 5 years, which could be a great bargain if he continues to play at an above-average level. If I had to put money on it, I would bet that Demko is going to play not quite as lights out as he's played this season, and against Vegas, I don't think that's sustainable for any goalie, but I do think he's going to be one of the better goalies in the league, probably top 5 going forward at definitely not top 5 numbers. I think that was a great signing. Why do I bring that up? Well, they signed Demko and they signed Pearson, but they still need to obviously sign their most important franchise players on the front and the back of this team, Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes. They have not been extended. They have not been signed. It's been quiet on that front. I guess the Canucks just want to get these deals out of the way so they can focus on the big two. They're RFAs. They don't need to rush, but time is running out, and we've seen that this team has literally come out and said, we just ran out of time before. The team doesn't want to paint themselves into a corner. Well, we don't want to see the team paint themselves into a corner, but they just might do that. And if they do, they could botch the signings of Pettersson and Hughes. Maybe not having enough money to give them term, or not having enough money to have any kind of leverage. This could end up being an issue. It might not be Some of the bad contracts are going to come off the books soon, but there's still a lot of bad money on this roster at the end of the season when it comes time to sign Pearson and Hughes. And without those players on good contracts, the competitive window for this team is going to be drastically affected. There's so many reasons to be annoyed with this contract. How about Tyler Toffoli making less than $1 million more, yet having a fantastic season, even if you take out the ridiculous amount of goals he racked up against the Canucks, padding his stats. Adding insult to injury, even worse, Toffoli was acquired at the deadline last season for a second rounder, Tyler Madden, and then also somehow the Canucks getting Tim Schaller off the books. Again, the contract management has been terrible, but that was a pretty good trade if you can either re-sign Toffoli or you have a deep playoff run. This is what teams do who are very good and are expecting to win the cup. They go all in. They throw out prospects and picks and go for deals. Well, they go for players on expiring deals. The Canucks were not in that position. And Benning just said he expects to be competitive in 2 years. The Canucks stunned the defending champion St. Louis Blues last playoffs. And stunned Vegas, taking them to the limit, with Thatcher Demko playing some of the greatest goaltending we've ever seen on this team. They were not supposed to be a big problem for St. Louis and Vegas. They were. It was exciting, but we saw in the last few games against Vegas, the Canucks were completely outplayed. They were hanging on for dear life, and it was Thatcher Demko that gave them any kind of a chance to win those last few games. But Toffoli had expressed interest in staying with Vancouver. He seemed happy playing in their top six. It seemed like he had chemistry. The guy spent his whole life playing on the West Coast in LA. A quick move up to Vancouver is not that much of a difference. He looked happy. He looked like he wanted to stay. He felt like a good fit. He felt like he gave the Canucks some leadership, some of that championship veteran presence. But I really hope this is the last time we have to bring it up. It just seems to be brought up because of the connection with Pearson and because he just gave a guy $3.25 million who is struggling to produce. And the consensus on him is definitely that he's a second/third liner. And that $1 million more could have been the contract for Toffoli. Maybe Toffoli would have taken less to stay with Vancouver. Maybe he considered himself a $5 million player and only took less because he felt like he himself was running out of time. Maybe that money could have been for Chris Tanev, who, yes, Tanev is old, struggles to play. Well, he's old for a hockey player. He's old for a defensive defenseman who blocks shots and gets injured every year. He's old for not the fastest defenseman, but he's not slow. The guy can skate. But he is definitely missed a team that is completely lacking a solid, reliable, actual defensive defenseman who fitted incredibly well with Hughes, made Hughes look like an all-star last year, and we've seen Hughes struggle. The guy still has his offense. I still believe Hughes is a bit injured. He just doesn't look like he's skating like he was before. Adding to the pain is the ridiculous backloaded Jake Virtanen contract. A player who has done very little to earn that money in his 311 games with the Canucks. Jake Virtanen's contract is so bad, it's already hard to trade. Not even a year later, and being considered for a buyout, and could stop Seattle from taking a gamble on him. The Pearson signing is a microcosm of this management issue. It's either Aquilini forcing his ideas onto Benning, and that needs to stop. This guy has a lot of Pizza Huts to run, and he shouldn't have the time, nor experience to evaluate NHL talent and run a franchise. If Benning is to blame, then it's just further proof he was best as an assistant GM. A guy with a good eye and some great ideas, but has far too many misses on his record, whether they're deserved or not. This is just a complete Canuck Twitter fantasy, but I've often think, how cool would it be if Mike Gillis came back? I know, Canuck Twitter fantasy. As the president of hockey operations. Benning as a GM or assistant GM could be a fun idea too. Benning negotiating trades with the other old boy GMs who seem to like him. Benning does well in a lot of trades. And I get the feeling that the old boy GMs think of Gillis as a pretentious know-it-all. And hearing him in interviews and how he comes up on the radio, he can probably be a pretentious know-it-all, but he did a lot of great things for the Canucks. It wasn't too long ago that the Canucks were leading the league in innovation, as well as leading the league in points and wins and getting trophies for their teams and going to the Stanley Cup final. But Gillis transformed the Canucks and Vancouver into a destination for top free agents. Sundin came here to play. Pavel Demitra, great player. You know, they had Christian Ehrhoff on this team. I know he came over in a trade. But now they seem to be, Vancouver that is, the number one choice for declining players looking for a better deal than they're going to find anywhere else. This whole video has been a pretty negative rant considering I love Pearson's play. I think Pearson is one of the most consistent players on the team ever since the Canucks got him, even through this terrible year. I constantly am impressed what he does when the puck gets near him. He's a decent playmaker. He's physical. He sticks up for his team. He's got a good shot. He can score when you get him in the right spot. He plays pretty well defensively. I like the guy at a good number. $3 million, it's not great. It's not any kind of a discount. And in a year where, man, he really probably would have got squeezed. The Canucks did absolutely no squeezing, no bargaining. They bought full freight. I'm still going to enjoy seeing Pearson out there for the next few seasons, and he'll definitely provide way more value than the other dead contracts on the team, like Jake, Sutter, Roussel, and Beagle, who we're hearing might be on long-term injured reserve, alongside Verland and Luongo in a way. I'm glad Pearson's at the party, but the piece of cake, the Canucks just cut him might mean there isn't enough to go around when it matters most. Thank you very much for listening. I'd like to know what you think about the Pearson deal. I'll talk to you next time.